Hey guys, today we are reacting to some scary animations. And we are going to be watching Snarled. Let's see here. First, we're going to be reacting to Smile
Hey,
Dog.
I'm Markia. Want to hear something scary?
Markia.
Smile Dog. Creepy images on the internet can sear themselves into our memory, leaving such a lasting impression we can't help but share them. They beckon us to share, like a curse passed amongst friends.
It was...
No other image has haunted the online world like Smile.dog. Enjoy this classic creepypasta and spread the word. In 2005, when I was only in 10th grade, Smile.dog first came to my attention through my interest in web phenomena. Mary E. was the most often cited victim. In 1992, when she first encountered Smile.dog, and her life changed forever. Mary was one of an estimated 400 people who saw the image when it was posted, though she is the only one who has spoken openly about the experience. The entire phenomenon centers on a picture file that is nowhere to be found on the internet. Many photo-manipulated simulacra litter the web. It is suspected these are fakes. Encounters with Smile.dog are the stuff of internet legend. There are unverified rumors and even one persistent tale that in 2002, a hacker flooded forums with a deluge of Smile.dog pictures. It is also said that in the mid to late 90s, that Smile.dog circulated as an attachment of a chain email with the subject line, "Smile, God loves you." All alleged victims offer the same description of the photo. A dog-like creature, illuminated by the flash of the camera, sits in a dim room. The only background detail that is visible is a human hand extending from the darkness near the left side of the frame. The hand is empty, but is usually described as beckoning. Of course, most attention is given to the dog. The muzzle of the beast is reputedly split in a wide grin, revealing two rows of very white, very straight, very sharp, very human-looking teeth. This is a recollection of the victims who claim to have seen the picture endlessly repeated in their mind's eye during the time they are in reality having epileptic fits. These fits are reported to continue often while the victims sleep, resulting in disturbing nightmares. In the summer of 2007, I was a writer gathering information for a few college assignments, and Mary E. had agreed to schedule an interview. At the last moment, Mary changed her mind and locked herself in, refusing to meet with me. For a time after my visit to Mary's apartment, nothing happened. Mary contacted me via email, however, near the beginning of March 2008. Subject: last summer's interview. Dear Mr. L., I am incredibly sorry about my behavior last summer when you came to interview me. I hope you understand that it was no fault of yours. Forgive me. At the time, I was afraid. For 15 years, I have been haunted. Smile Dog comes to me in my sleep every night. The only thing ahead of me is that horrible picture. I see the beckoning hand and Smile Dog. It talks to me. Though I'm not quite sure what it really is.
I'm pretty sure it was hi. I'm Sapphire. Wanna hear something scary?
Tells me it will leave me alone if only I do as it asks and spread the word. And I know exactly what it means. It wants me to show it to someone else, and I could. The week after my incident, I received in the mail a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was only a 3.5-inch floppy diskette. Without having to check, I knew precisely what was on it. I thought for a long time about my options. If Smile Dog kept its word, I could sleep. Yet if it lied, what would I do? I kept the diskette hidden amongst my things. Every night for 15 years, Smile Dog has come to me in my sleep and demanded that I spread the word. For 15 years, I have stood strong, though there have been hard times. Many of my fellow victims where I first encountered Smile Dogs stopped posting. I heard some of them committed suicide. Others remained completely silent, simply disappearing off the face of the web. I sincerely hope you will forgive me, Mr. L, but last summer I was near the breaking point. I decided I was going to give you the floppy diskette. I wanted it to end. You were a stranger, and I thought I would not feel sorrow when you took the diskette and sealed your fate. Before you arrived, I realized what I was doing. I am ashamed, Mr. L, and I hope that this warning will dissuade you from further investigation of Smile Dog. You may in time encounter someone who is, if not weaker than I, then wholly more depraved. Someone who will not hesitate to follow Smile Dog's orders. Stop while you are still whole. Sincerely, Mary E. Mary's husband, Terrence, contacted me later that month with the news that his wife had killed herself. I will admit that I was a little uncertain about how to respond to this. A quick check of several Chicago newspapers' online obituaries, however, proved that Mary E. was indeed dead. Almost a full year after, I received another email. Subject, Smile. Hello. I found your email address through a mailing list. Your profile said you were interested in Smile Dog. I have saw it. It is not as bad as everyone says. I have sent it to you here. Just spreading the word. Smiley face. The final line chilled me to the bone. There was one file attachment, smile.dog. If I downloaded the image, if I looked at it, and if Mary turned out to be correct, if smile.dog came to me in my dreams, demanding I spread the word, what would I do? Would I live my life as Mary had? Or would I simply spread the word, eager to be put to rest? If I went through with my earlier intention to write a short article about smile.dog, I could attach it as evidence. And anyone who read the article, anyone who took interest would be affected. And even assuming the smile.dog attached to the email was genuine, would I save myself in that manner? Could I spread the word? Yes. Yes, I could. Hey, my dark darlings. Have y'all had a chance to check out our monster stickers yet? For sale on the shelf below or at Teespring.
Go play with that. Let's find the ones with sapphire.
I'm a steadfast believer in dressing.
No.
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
These are the ones.
Juliana. Hey, Oddings, it's your Ate Sapphire. Stick around later in the episode to hear a special offer from one of our sponsors, ThreadUp. Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? In 1970, a young woman named Donna was turning 28, and for her birthday, her mother gave her a seemingly harmless Raggedy Ann doll that she purchased from a secondhand store. Both Donna and her roommate Angie were nurses, and so they were out of the house most of the time, leaving the doll in the apartment alone. They didn't think much of their new roommate until strange things started happening. One night, after a long shift, Donna came home to find the doll sitting on her bed in her closed bedroom, which would have been perfectly fine if that's where Donna had left her. Other nights, Donna would find the doll sitting on the couch with her legs crossed and arms folded, or standing upright in the kitchen. Both Donna and Angie were rational young women and believed there had to be a reasonable explanation for this. Maybe they were just remembering things wrong. But Lou, Angie's fiance, thought otherwise. He did not trust that doll one bit and wanted them to get rid of it, or at least consult a medium to see if there truly was something inside it. But Donna and Angie didn't believe that was possible, so they carried on as usual. Then, they began finding handwritten notes around the house. They were written in pencil in childlike handwriting on pieces of parchment, a type of paper that no one in the house owned. They read, "Help us." One night, Donna came home and found a mysterious red liquid on the doll's hands and chest. It looked like blood, but it was coming from the doll itself.
Okay.
That was the push that Donna and Angie needed to come to terms with the fact that there was something wrong with this doll. They brought in a medium and performed a seance. "A long time ago," the medium said, "before this apartment complex was built, there was a field on this property. And it was here that the body of 7-year-old Annabelle Higgins was found. And it is in this doll that her spirit now lives. She trusts you and just wants to be around you." Donna and Angie felt sorry for Annabelle and decided to let her stay in the apartment with them. Lou was not happy about that. One night, it was just Lou and Angie in the apartment, packing up for a road trip they were leaving on in the morning. Lou was walking to the kitchen and past Donna's room and heard shuffling coming from inside. Donna wasn't home, so who could it be? Lou threw the door open. There was nobody there. Nobody human, at least. He walked inside and saw Annabelle, sitting in the corner of the room. As he walked towards her, he got the burning feeling as though someone were standing behind him. He whipped around to find nobody. He turned back to Annabelle and felt burning again, but this time on his chest. He lifted his shirt to find 7 distinct scratch marks singed into his skin. The following morning, they called a priest, who then called Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned demonologists. "This doll is not possessed," Lorraine told Donna. "Demons only possess humans. This entity was using this doll."
This is the movie Annabelle. I could tell by Ed and Lauren, and I just realized they were calling it Annabelle. Don't look like Annabelle at all.
To manipulate you, moving it around the house so you would pay attention to it, then tricking a medium into telling you that it was the spirit of a harmless young girl. So, what does it want? Your soul. A priest performed an exorcism on the apartment, and the Warrens took Annabelle home with them in a bag. Knowing what this entity was capable of, they made sure to avoid the highways on their way home, since Annabelle would no doubt try to sabotage their drive. And they were right. Along the way, the car's engine continuously stalled. So, is Annabelle truly dangerous? Or is all of this an elaborate hoax? If you're the type who needs to see to believe, you can actually visit Annabelle at the Occult Museum, a section of the Warrens' Connecticut home where they store haunted relics collected from the many cases they worked on. She's kept locked in a box with multiple warnings. One skeptical visitor made the fatal mistake of mocking the doll, tapping her glass case and daring her to do her worst on him. When he left for home, he got into a terrible motorcycle accident and died 3 hours later. Whether or not the Warrens created that story as a cautionary tale, would you really want to test it? So I personally love ThreadUp for multiple reasons. One, I love shopping secondhand because you get to find really unique pieces. And if I'm being complete, it's actually super easy, guaranteed to find something. Giving Something Scary listeners a limited time offer of an extra 30% off your first. But there were 4 girls in particular. Layla to pick on her. Christina, Emma, Jessica, and Jasmine.
The pocket watch. Inspired by Layla.
Layla had always been somewhat of an outcast at school. Because of her thin frame and gaunt features, kids were afraid.
I see why she an outcast. She looked like some demon fish mermaid.
of her. But there were 4
Ugly.
girls in particular who loved to pick on her. Christina, Emma, Jessica, and Jasmine. They would call her Demon Girl. Freak. She looks like a witch. Careful, she might put a spell on you. When Layla told a teacher about this, the girls...
I'm sorry for everything I just said. That's not just the animated, that's what she actually looks like. I'm sorry.
cornered her during lunch period and beat her up. Layla and her family had just moved to a new house. Unfortunately, it wasn't far enough for Layla to switch schools. But the move did excite her because there was a creepy graveyard nearby, and rumor had it that there was a black wooden hut where a witch lived. So one night, she decided to visit the hut alone.
You are my best friend, my only best friend. You make me happy, best friend. When skies up, best friend. Never know how much I love you, best friend. Please don't take my sunshine away from Bethlehem.
Led by nothing more than the light from her cell phone, she walked down the rocky path in the graveyard and stood before the small, cobweb-covered hut. There were no lights or sounds coming from inside. Layla reached for the door and pushed it open. Everything was covered in spiderwebs and dust.
Disgusting!
It looked like no one had stepped foot in there for decades. Layla walked around inside the small dark shack in fascination, but couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't completely alone. Then something caught her eye.
Snakes.
On the table was a pocket watch. It was the only thing in the shack that wasn't completely covered in dust. It didn't look like it worked anymore, though. It only had one hand, which pointed at 12. Still, Layla thought it was beautiful and interesting, so she put it in her pocket and went back home. The next morning, Layla got ready for school like every other day. But when she went downstairs to eat breakfast, her mom shot her a confused look. Did you dye your hair? No. Well, something's different. Layla ignored her mom's comment and ate her breakfast. When she went to the bathroom after her meal, she caught her reflection. Her mom was right. Her hair was darker. Her hair used to be a light brown, but now...
And 6th is wild animals that kill you and stuff, like bears and stuff.
I was almost black. And over the next month, her hair got even darker and her skin even paler. Her eyes were almost black as well. And then came the shadow. Every now and then in the corner of her eye, Layla would see someone watching her, but when she turned to look at it, it'd be gone. And every night she would dream that she was watching herself sleep, like she was watching from someone else's point of view. One day at school, Layla was trying to get to her classroom without one of her bullies noticing, but failed. Christina headed straight for her and immediately began throwing rude words in her face and shoving her. As Christina walked away to her next, bullies noticing, but failed. Christina headed straight for her and immediately began throwing rude words in her face and shoving her. As Christina walked away to her next class, Layla muttered under her breath, "I wish you would be out of my life forever." She pulled out the pocket watch and rubbed the engravings. Looking at the watch always made her feel calmer. Layla was both relieved and surprised when none of the girls came near her the rest of the day. The next day, Christina didn't show up to school. Rumor had it that her parents had last minute decided to move back to Shanghai. What an amazing coincidence, Layla thought. She pulled out her pocket watch and noticed something odd. The cover was flipped open, and the hand was now pointing at 1. The next day, Jessica was in a terrible car crash on her way to school and ended up in a coma. Then Jasmine had gone missing. These girls had always given Layla trouble, but she never wished this on them. She threw the pocket watch in the trash, but it just reappeared in her pocket. Eventually, anyone who had ever given Layla a hard time had something unpleasant happen to them. The hands now pointed at 11. "You're a demon, Layla. I don't know what you're doing, but it needs to stop. Do you understand?" I have put up with you and your awful friends for years, and you dare to ask mercy of me? I wish you were dead. The next day, Emma was found in the woods near her home. She was devoured by a pack of wolves. When Layla heard the news, she knew things had gone way too far. She had to destroy that pocket watch. That night, she went back to the graveyard near her house, to the hut. She threw the watch back on the table and ran back home. And the very next day, Jessica awoke from her coma. Jasmine had been found and reunited with her family. Even Layla's hair and skin were returning to their original colors. The curse was broken, and things were back the way they were. Well, maybe not quite. Everyone at school was talking about how Layla somehow put a curse on those who wronged her, and no one dared mess with her again. When Brooklyn was about 3 years old, she was diagnosed with a very serious heart problem. The doctors were always in a panic, horrified that her death would come any day. Brooklyn would constantly overhear nurses talking about how worried they were about a little girl. She thought that they might have been talking about her, but Brooklyn's mom calmed her down and reminded her that there were lots of patients in the hospital. Though it didn't help that whenever her nurse came into her room, her eyes were red and wet, like she had just been crying. It always made Brooklyn nervous. What was wrong? The night before Brooklyn was to undergo surgery, she asked her nurse, "You're always crying when you come in my room. Why?" The nurse froze. She slowly bent down and whispered in her ear, "You will understand when you see her." At the time, Brooklyn didn't know what that meant. The surgery was a success, and Brooklyn now had a new heart. Being a young girl, she couldn't quite yet grasp the gravity of what she had gone through. It didn't even cross her mind to wonder where this new heart had come from. She was just happy to be alive and well. Before she left the hospital, her nurse gave her a small stuffed bear and told her to take good care of it. Years had passed, and Brooklyn was now about 8 years old. She loved to draw and would sketch cute and happy characters like Winnie the Pooh and Dora the Explorer. But one day, while she was drawing, she heard a voice. It wasn't malevolent or scary, but rather calm and peaceful. "It makes me happy when you make art." It was faint, but Brooklyn knew that the voice was coming from the bear. She knew how crazy it sounded, but there was no doubt in her mind that there was a spirit living inside of it that wanted to be her friend. Her name was Rosalita, and she would talk to Brooklyn all the time, and Brooklyn would talk back. The problem was that no one else could hear Rosalita. Brooklyn's parents became concerned that their daughter was always locking herself in her room and talking to herself. But Brooklyn didn't care. Rosalita had become her friend. Brooklyn continued to draw pictures for her to make her happy. And Brooklyn believes that Rosalita helped her become a better artist. Rosalita would guide Brooklyn's hand on the paper. It was like she was a part of her. But Rosalita became tired of the childish drawings. "You need to make real art," she said. She told Brooklyn to walk outside into the yard where she found the bones of a dead mouse. "Turn it into art," Rosalita said. "Bring meaning to its death." So Brooklyn took the bones and glued them on a piece of paper, with Rosalita instructing her each step of the way. She hung it on her wall, and to this day, it's still there. It always made her parents uncomfortable, so they would always try and take it down. But whenever they would take it down, they would get sick the next day, and Brooklyn would hang it back up. Did Rosalita have something to do with that? For the most part, Rosalita was always sweet and kind. But there was something odd that happened a few times that concerned Brooklyn. When their first family dog died suddenly, Brooklyn was heartbroken. Rosalita, however, was the opposite. "Now we can spend more time together." And in the span of a few weeks, her other family members' dogs unexplainably passed away. Did Rosalita have anything to do with that? Brooklyn is now 19 years old and still speaks to the stuffed bear that hosts Rosalita's spirit. "Do you remember the nurse who gave this bear to you?" "Yes, I do." "She was my mom. She was always crying because I wasn't doing well. I was staying in the same hospital as you. Did anyone ever tell you where your new heart came from? No. You are my art. Your life brought meaning to my death. Brooklyn began to cry. Thank you so much. You're so important to me. But, Rosalita continued, on your 21st birthday, I have to go. What do you mean? I have to move on. Oh, why? Rosalita paused. I just have to go. And I'm bringing my heart with me. Does that mean that I'll... Rosalita didn't say another word and wouldn't answer Brooklyn whenever she brought it up again. What did Rosalita mean by that? Guess she'll find out in 2 years. Thank you to all of our patrons. If you'd like to join our VIP program, visit patreon.com/snarled.
Would you like to connect to free Wi-Fi in your city without asking for passwords and enjoy a fast, stable, and free internet connection?
Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
Bloody
One
Mary.
night when I was 16, I spent the night at a friend's house. Neither
Hi, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
of us had tried Bloody Mary
Hi, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
before, and we decided that tonight was the night that we would. If you have some...
Hi, I'm Dallas. Want to hear something scary? Hi, I'm Dallas. Want to hear something scary? Hi, I'm Dallas. Want to hear something scary? Hi, I'm Dallas. Want to hear something scary?
Somehow managed to miss that part of your childhood. Bloody Mary is the urban legend that claims if you stand in front of a mirror in the dark, spin around and chant Bloody Mary 3 times, she will appear in the mirror and claw your face. So, my friend and I went into the bathroom, turned off the lights, lit some candles, and spun around, chanting, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary.
We opened our eyes, and there, in the mirror, was a head so covered in blood that it was just completely red. We screamed and ran
Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary.
out of the bathroom and never went back in the rest of the night. When it was time for bed, my friend's father came in to tell us goodnight. Hey girls, he said, are any of you on your period by any chance? No. Why do you ask? Oh, okay, well, there's blood on the bathroom floor, so I'd like you to clean it up when you get a chance, please. The Philippines is full of incredible mythology and fantastic creatures. My grandpa has always been a believer of these myths. That's because he's experienced them. This is what he told me. I lived
What the heck? Freaking saggy tittle, no nipple having, crying down your back, fat, lost a half of your body, having freak of nature.
in a rural town in the Visayan
Look like a freaking girl demon version of cut in half Batman.
Islands of the Philippines. I was in my mid-20s and working late one night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning
So cut in half demon version of Batgirl.
when I began to walk my way to the bus station, my way lit only by the full moon. I've walked this path many times. I passed by this house that had a dog in the yard that would always bark at me when I passed. But tonight, it just stared and just watched as I walked by. And that's when I heard it. A very strange sound in the distance. I had heard of the tikwi, sometimes known as a wak-wak or aswang. It separates from the lower half of its body to fly around at night, searching for any living soul, to rip out their hearts with their taloned feet and feast. And when you hear its call,
Disgusted.
you know it's hungry. So I continued walking towards the bus station, and I could still faintly hear the sound. And I saw that there was a security booth with a guard inside. I didn't want to wait at the station alone, so I slipped inside the booth and waited with the guard. I still wasn't sure if I was imagining the sound, but from the look on the guard's face, I'm pretty sure he heard it too. So we both just sat there, motionless. Finally, the bus arrived, and I ran out of the booth and onto the bus and rode all the way home, the sounds of the tikwi growing fainter and fainter. The next day, I told my coworkers what had happened, and that's when one of them told me, tikwis are master tricksters. The further away they sound, the closer they are. This is a story that was passed around a lot when I was younger, and it still gives me chills to this day. Let me tell you about the man who was a little too curious.
I bet you this one he got stabbed in the eyeball.
And decided to stay the night in a motel that I found on the roadside. After checking in, I walked down the hall to my room, but on my way I noticed a door that was all boarded up and covered in police tape. As soon as I passed I could have sworn I heard someone singing from inside the room. There was one spot of the door that was still uncovered, a giant keyhole, big enough to see through to the inside. So I knelt down and peeked inside the hole. All I saw was this pale little girl singing to herself. It was so strange. Why was she there by herself? Anyways, I stood up and went to my room and went to sleep. The next morning, on my way to check out, I passed the door again. I still couldn't believe what I saw the night before, so I decided to take another peek. So I knelt down and took another look inside. But this time, all I could see was red. Nothing but red. Did she notice me looking last night and cover the hole up with something? It was all very strange. I went to the concierge to check out, and I decided to ask her, "So, what's up with that room? The one that's all boarded up?" "Well," she said, "a while ago, a family checked in. A mother, a father, and their young girl. But that poor girl never checked out. Her parents murdered her in that room. Oh, I'll never forget them. They had incredibly pale skin and deep blood-red eyes." So this is a story that my aunt told me happened to her when she was in her mid-20s. She was living in the Philippines at the time, and she had a niece who was a freshman in high school. So one day, the high school called her and said, "You need to get over here right now. Your niece is acting really weird." And my aunt had no idea what they were talking about. And so when she got to the school, her niece was sitting on a chair, and she looked really out of it. And if anyone tried to touch her, she would violently hit their hand away and yell at them in a cold, deep voice that clearly wasn't hers. So they had no idea what to do. So they called the sheriff of the town to see if he had any ideas. And so the sheriff got there, and it was pretty clear to him that she was probably possessed by something. And so he asked her, "What are you doing to this girl? Why are you here?"
"She hurt my children. She stepped on my house."
"Wait, how is that even possible? Where is your house?"
"Outside of the school."
So there's this Filipino superstition that you shouldn't step on anthills or termite hills, basically any mound of dirt in the ground, because there's a creature that lives in them called the duende. Duendes are sort of similar to elves or goblins, and they're invisible to most people, but they do show themselves to children or some adults that they choose. They mostly just leave you alone, but if you mess with them, they can bring you a lot of bad luck and misfortune, and in the worst case, death. And right outside the school is filled with anthills. So unfortunately, my aunt's niece did not know about this rule. So the sheriff started pleading with this spirit inside the girl. "She's just a kid. I'm sure it was just an accident. What can we do so that you will forgive her and leave her alone?"
"Get bananas, oranges, and salt and bring it to my house."
So they went to the store and they got a bunch of fruit and salt, and then they placed it all around the anthills that were outside of the school. And then when they went back inside the school, my aunt's niece was totally normal. Like, she didn't even know what had happened. And she didn't remember speaking in any weird voice. She just thought that she fell asleep. My aunt is a super sane person. I have no reason to believe that she would ever lie to me about this. Something that makes this story a little weirder for me is that this is not the first story about a duende that family members have told me. So my mom's side of the family used to live in Hawaii when she was younger. When my uncle was 3 years old, one day he sort of just went missing for a few hours, and so everyone was looking for him. A few hours later, he just showed up at the front door, and they're like, "Where did you go?" And he said, "Oh, I was playing with the little people." So my family is pretty convinced that the little people that he was playing with were duendes. So a few years ago, there was a pretty well-off family that lived in a really big house in Newport Beach, California.
Okay.
A mother, a father, and 2 small kids.
Wow.
And one night, the parents decided that they wanted a night out for themselves, so they hired a babysitter. She was maybe about 16 years old. So when the babysitter got there, the parents gave her a little rundown of what to do. And the mom pulled her aside and said, "Once you finish tucking the kids in, do you mind watching TV in our bedroom? The kids have been having nightmares lately and waking up screaming. And our room is right next to theirs, and so it's a lot easier to get to them." "Yeah, sure, I can do that." So the babysitter and the 2 small children waved goodbye to their parents. So after a few hours of watching TV, it was time for bed. And as she was tucking them in, one of the kids said, "Please don't let the clown get us." "Of course I'm not going to let anything happen to you." So she turned off the lights and went next door to the parents' room like the mom had asked. But the second that she stepped inside, she froze. In the far corner of the room was a clown statue. Just a really lifelike, detailed, creepy-ass statue. No wonder these kids have been having nightmares, she thought to herself. So she went and sat on the bed and tried to watch some TV, but she kept looking over at the statue. Was the statue looking at me like that before? It was way too creepy for her, so she decided to go downstairs to the living room and watch TV there until the parents came back. So she's watching some TV for a while, and then her phone rings, and it's the parents just checking in. "Hey, we're on our way home. Just wanted to check in and see how things are going." "Everything's great. The kids are all asleep and in bed. I hope it's okay, but I decided to watch TV downstairs instead. Your statue was really creeping me out." I'm sorry, what statue?"
Excuse me. I'm sorry, what statue? So there's a little midget, clown midget, ducking down in the corner, just got a head over here like this, just breathing. Meanwhile, she sitting there. When you walking around the room, his head turns looking at you. She watching TV looking at him. Meanwhile, this dude's just breathing in the corner. Gosh.
"The clown statue in your room? It's really creepy, so I decided to leave the room." "Get the kids now." "Wait, what?" "Get the kids and get out of the house now. We don't have a statue." Just then, she heard screams. She dropped the phone and ran up the stairs. The bedroom seemed so much farther than it did before. She opened the door, but she was too late. So apparently there was a little person serial killer that would dress up as clowns and break into people's houses and murder people.
Yep.
So this story is 100% creepy.
Got that right.
And 100% true. So my aunt, my cousin, and her youngest sister, Genesis, who was maybe 3 at the time, were in their townhouse in Glendale. My aunt and my older cousin were talking outside of the master bedroom, and Genesis was playing inside of the room by herself. And out of nowhere, they hear Genesis start to scream. So my aunt and my cousin go inside the room to see what's wrong, and they see Genesis crying hysterically and grabbing books and toys and pillows and just throwing them in this one corner of the room. And they ask her, "Genesis, what's wrong?"
"Tell the little red girl I don't want to play with her."
So my aunt and my cousin grab Genesis and they get out of the house and they head to McDonald's to go get a Happy Meal so that they can calm her down. So when they got home, they remembered that Genesis made a huge mess in the room, so they went to go clean it up. But when they went inside the room, everything was already put away. we're leaving again, so they left the house again. So my aunt was telling her neighbor at the time about what had happened and what Genesis said she saw, and her neighbor told her that a little girl had actually died in that complex 15 years earlier. They moved out like 6 months later. I was maybe like 7 when my cousin told me that story, and I remember being like, yeah, I'm not visiting you guys ever again. I was actually talking to my cousin Genesis about this recently over the holidays, and she said that she actually used to play with that little girl a lot. So I guess that little girl like wasn't always scary to her. I guess maybe it was just that one time she just like didn't want to play with her. This is part of the reason why I don't want kids. Because if my kid started like talking to nobody, I'd be like, nope, I'm out. Have you heard of the Black-Eyed Children? It's not an early 2000s cover band consisting of infants. It's a phenomenon that's been increasing in popularity over the past few years. The basic story is always the same. You're in your house, and then in the middle of the night you hear a knock on your door. And if you open the door, you'll see 2 young children with completely black eyes. They'll ask if they can come in. And whatever you do, don't let them in. Whether they actually exist or not, this is the creepiest encounter that I found online. This woman made the mistake of letting the Black-Eyed Children in. This is what happened. So this woman and her husband live in a rural town in Vermont, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And one snowy night, they are awoken at 2 a.m. to a really loud banging on the door. So they open the door, and they see a young boy and a young girl, and they're definitely not appropriately dressed for the snow. They're avoiding eye contact and just staring at the ground. There was something really uneasy about these kids. And so they asked them, where are your parents?
They'll be here soon. Can we come in?
So this woman and her husband just looked at each other, and despite all of their instincts telling them not to, they decided to let the children in. So the woman went into the kitchen to make everyone some hot cocoa, and her husband went into the living room and was sitting there with the kids and trying to get more information out of them. And that's when she noticed her cat was acting really weird. Usually her cat is really friendly and likes to approach any guests that come into the house. But this time, he just hid underneath the kitchen table and was staring at the children and growling very lowly. So the woman took the hot cocoa and went into the living room, and she noticed that her husband had his head in his hands. I feel really dizzy. The woman went to hand the cocoa to the children, and that's when they looked up at her for the first time. Their eyes were completely black. No whites, just black.
Maybe use the restroom?
And the kids left for the hallway. The woman turned to her husband and said, "Did you see their eyes?" Her husband lifted his head up, and his nose was bleeding. And just then, the power went out. She couldn't help but think that the presence of these children had something to do with this. And so the woman stumbled her way over to the bathroom to see if she could get a tissue, and the 2 children were just standing there in the hallway.
Our parents are here.
So the kids went to the front door, left it wide open, and the woman saw these 2 really tall men in dark suits standing at the edge of their driveway. The woman waved at them, but the power went, and the kids left her and went into the living room, and she noticed that her husband had his head in his hands. I feel her husband
Parents are here.
So they pulled her way over to the thing. And just then, the power went out. She couldn't help but think that the presence of these children had something to do with this. And so the woman stumbled her way over to the bathroom to see if she could get a tissue, and the 2 children were just standing there in the hallway.
Our parents are here.
So the kids went to the front door, left it wide open, and the woman saw these 2 really tall men in dark suits standing.
By the way, if you see her wearing different clothes, these are different videos she made that she added them together. So she's going to be wearing different clothes in each one.
At the edge of their driveway. The woman waved at them, but they didn't react at all and went in their car, and all 4 of them drove away. The power came back on about half an hour later, but not everything went back to normal. A few days later, 3 of their 4 cats went missing, And one night, they came home to find their cat dead in a puddle of its own blood. Her husband continued to have nosebleeds, and when he went to the doctor, he was diagnosed with a very aggressive type of skin cancer, a type that's linked to overuse of indoor tanning beds, which he's never used. She also claims that she started getting nosebleeds and feeling really dizzy randomly, and even some unspeakable things that she refused to disclose in her story. So this is another story from my cousin because she's the worst. She was about 16 and she was over at a friend's house for a slumber party. And her friend has a collection of really expensive porcelain dolls, like all along the shelves. She also had a Ouija board, and she really wanted to try it out that night. So if you don't know what a Ouija board is, it's basically a board with a bunch of letters and some words like yes or no. And there's a planchette, and so everyone who's playing places 2 fingers on the planchette lightly, and you ask the board a question, and supposedly, if there's any spirits around in the room, the spirits will move the planchette along with your fingers and spell out their answers to your question. So if you don't believe in spirits, there's actually a really scientific explanation to how these Ouija boards work, and it's called the ideomotor effect. If everybody is focused on that answer, everyone's fingers will start moving that direction. And because there's so many other fingers other than yours involved, you don't think that you have anything to do with it. It feels like you're not moving it at all. So if you're using a Ouija board to talk to the spirits, supposedly you are opening a door to their dimension. And that's why it's really, really, really important to always properly say goodbye at the end of your session. Otherwise, you're just leaving the door wide open for whatever to come in. So I've seen plenty of videos debunking Ouija boards. I know all about the ideomotor effect. I know that there really isn't a reason I should be afraid, but I will never fuck with a Ouija board because of stories like this one. So all the other girls at the party were totally down to play with the Ouija board, but not my cousin, and so she decided to just stand off in a corner and watch. So they lit some candles and they started asking questions. Is anybody here?
Nope.
Yes.
Oh, yep.
Are you a spirit?
Yep.
Yes. Are you a good spirit?
Nope.
No. So some of the girls are pretty convinced that somebody is controlling the planchette. And so they asked my cousin, why don't you ask it something that no one here knows the answer to, and then we'll know if somebody's moving it. What animal am I thinking of? Turtle. And they all looked over at my cousin, and she was just wide-eyed and shocked. And that just made all the other girls even more excited. So they continued to play, and eventually they asked, where are you? COLL. Just then, all of the dolls, one by one, turned their heads to the right, and then they jumped off of the shelf and the candles blew out. Everybody screamed and was scrambling to get out of that room in the darkness without properly ending the game. When my cousin was running out of the room, she swears she felt a tiny little hand clawing at her foot. Obviously, none of the girls slept in that room that night. So the next morning, they grabbed trash bags and started tossing all of the dolls into the trash bags. And my cousin's friend's mom came over and was like, what are you doing? You love these dolls. Not anymore, Mom. Love can be a very scary thing. This is an old ghost story from Japan about sweet revenge. It was first told in the form of a kabuki play in 1825. There once was a man named Iyamon who was married to a loving and devoted wife named Oiya. He was a ronin, a samurai who no longer had a master because he had a murderous
I've seen this today.
And now, he was a poor umbrella maker. Since they were no longer financially stable, he grew to resent his wife. Then, his neighbor lured him into an evil scheme. My daughter, Awu.
I don't care about this stupid.
Hey, I'm Sapphire.
Want to hear something scary?
There's no place like home, especially if it's haunted. In this next volume, I will be telling tales of homes that might have a few too many residents. These stories are all about old houses with sinister histories and spirits that just aren't ready to move out yet. For the first chapter, I will be telling you a story that my mother told me. When my mom was about 11 years old, her 3 siblings, and their parents moved to America from the Philippines. My grandma was friends with a woman named
Your mom copied my hairstyle.
Francine, who lived in Hawaii with her husband, Decoy. She told them they could stay at their house until they got settled in. It was a fairly
Decoy is looking like a decoy.
small house. There was one master bedroom where Francine and Decoy slept, one other bedroom where my mom's family stayed, and a living room
For reals, bruh. Yeah.
area. My mom has many fond memories of living in that neighborhood, like learning how to
If I keep on pausing, KK, that's what reacting to something is.
ride a bike and playing by the nearby stream. But she also had many strange ones. For instance, Francine and Decoy owned the psychiatric institution that was right next door to the house. And my mom remembers seeing some of the patients running outside completely naked. Although surprising at first, her and her
Oh! Disgusted. Get your clothes back on. Nobody wants to see your freaking needle D's and your anuses.
siblings got used to it. But none
Nobody wants to see your vajayjay, anuses, and needle D's.
of them could explain away what happened on the night of Decoy's ex-wife's death anniversary. So Decoy was a moncadista, a member of the Filipino Crusaders World Army, which was a cult started by the politician and mystic Hilario Camino Moncado. His followers believed that he was a prophet with supernatural powers. He claimed that he had the ability to heal the sick. You can always spot a moncadista because of their long hair and beards, as it was against their beliefs to cut it. My mother remembers Decoy being very strong for his age. Perhaps that was due to the skeleton he kept underneath his bed, which according to the moncadistas, the bones of the deceased would give you strength. I heard that the skeleton under his bed is his ex-wife, some people said. But my mom never saw the skeleton. Decoy kept the master bedroom locked at all times, with a giant padlock on the outside. Who was he trying to keep out? Or in? One night, my grandparents were about to leave the kids in the house by themselves. It was the death anniversary of Decoy's ex-wife, and they were going to go to a celebration in her honor. The kids were a little scared to be left alone for the first time, and so Decoy's granddaughter left her little dog with them. "Don't worry, he'll protect you," she said, jokingly. So my grandparents drove away, and my mom and her siblings were left alone in the house. They were watching TV when all of a sudden, a chill shot up my mom's spine. The TV went white, and the power in the house went out. Then, the dog ran over to the bedroom door and started barking and running around in circles. The door to the locked bedroom began shaking violently. Nothing else in the house was rattling, and there were no windows open and no wind blowing. It looked like someone was trying to get out. "It's Decoy's ex-wife!" They screamed and ran out of the house, right when their parents were pulling into the driveway. The kids were crying and trying to tell them what happened. Decoy's granddaughter tried to calm them down and went inside the house to get her dog. She didn't come back out for a few minutes, but when she did, she was in tears. "I just saw my grandmother." If it was truly Decoy's ex-wife in that house that night, what did she want? What was she trying to say? This is a true story from a friend of mine who spent 3 months living in a haunted house. When Lauren was 4 years old, her dad got a new job in West Virginia.
Is it Lauren Z Size, the YouTuber?
They bought
Ante Sapphire. Is it? KK.
a nice plot of land where they planned to build their house. It was going to be a while before they would be able to move in, and so they looked around for a house they could live in temporarily. They needed to find a place fast, and so they were excited to find one that was incredibly cheap. They pulled up to a large house made of old dark wood on Kenwood Place. The front yard had a tree from which a rickety old swing swayed in the wind. In the backyard was a pool. This house was built in the 1800s. It's got a lot of charm and history, so are you interested? The realtor said, shoving the contracts in front of them. They barely had a chance to look at the entire house, but Lauren's parents were so desperate to find a place that they weren't even taken aback by how insistent the realtor was. It is a really good deal, Lauren's mom said, and it'll only be temporary. Yes, we'll take it, Lauren's dad told her. Oh, thank God. Congratulations! From the moment they moved into the house, everyone in the family had an uneasy feeling, but because they were desperate, they chose to ignore it. Odd things happened every now and then, like showers turning on and off when no one was in the bathroom. Lights would turn back on after being turned off. Lauren's parents would accuse her of playing with the switches, but Lauren was much too short to reach them. They also kept hearing weird, muffled sounds, like groans and crying, all coming from the one room they hadn't had a chance to look at, the basement. It's probably just old pipes, her dad would say. A week had passed since they moved in, and they decided to celebrate by taking a dip in their new pool. Lauren couldn't swim, so she stayed at the edge, right by her mother. Then the phone inside the house began to ring. Honey, can you keep an eye on Lauren? And no more than 1 second after she stepped out of the pool, she heard a loud splash. She turned around to find Lauren in the other end of the pool, sinking deeper and deeper under the water. Lauren's mother jumped back in and swam towards her daughter and pulled her out to safety. She has no idea how Lauren ended up on the opposite side of the pool in such a short amount of time. That wasn't the only time something unexplainable happened to Lauren. She never used to have trouble sleeping alone until she moved to that house. Some nights, before she went to bed, she would hear a woman say, "Good night," right as she turned off the lights. And it wasn't her mother's voice. The sounds from the basement continued until one day, her dad decided to go down there and investigate. He opened the door, turned on the lights, and screamed. Lauren and her mother came running, and her mother told her not to look, but of course she did. There, in the basement, was an antique electric chair. As it turns out, this house was used as a torture site in the 1800s, and many people suffered and lost their lives within these walls. Over the next 3 months, strange things continued to happen. Lauren's dad had a mysterious cut on his hand that wouldn't heal. Her mother almost suffocated from shame when she wasn't eating. They finally decided to sell the house and stay in a hotel until their new house was finished with construction. The day they left, Lauren saw a man.
This Father's Day, staying active together starts at Dick's Sporting Goods. Save up to 40% on select drivers. Earn triple points on new golf equipment from Callaway, TaylorMade, and Cobra.
Ume is a... Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary? Hey, Ottings, it's your Ate Sapphire. Stick around. Hey, Ottings, it's your Ate Sapphire. Hey, Ottings, it's your Ate Sapphire. Stick around later in the episode to hear a special offer from one of our sponsors, ThreadUp. Hey, I'm Sapphire.
I was watching this one.
Lauren saw a man waving goodbye to them on the front steps. It wasn't until they moved out of that house that they learned that the previous owners also had similar things happen to them. And the man who bought the house after them was arrested for being in possession of torture weapons, which he swears didn't belong to him, but were part of the house. Whether or not the people who were killed in that house deserve to die, they've made it very clear that they don't want to be the only ones to suffer there. In this next chapter, I'll be taking you down south to the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana. Let's explore one of the most haunted locations in the entire city, the LaLaurie House. In 1832, Dr. Louis LaLaurie and his wife Delphine moved into their beautiful mansion at 1140 Royal Street. The house was made for extravagant parties and elite social gatherings. Madame LaLaurie was considered one of the most intelligent and beautiful women in the entire city. Every woman wanted to be her. But as beautiful as she was on the outside, people were beginning to suspect that something ugly was going on behind closed doors. Like most wealthy families during that time, the LaLauries owned slaves. They prepared the meals and made the fancy parties possible. but rumors began to stir. Madam's slaves seem to come and go quite often, don't you think? What do you mean? Look around. Do any of these workers look familiar to you? It seems like she changes them so often. Huh, I wonder why that is. Suspicions had been rising, but with no proof to back any of them up. Until one day, when a neighbor was climbing her stairs, she heard a scream coming from the LaLaurie house and looked over to see Madam chasing a little girl with a whip. There was nothing she could do but watch in horror as the little girl climbed to the rooftop with Madam following close behind. With nowhere to go, the little girl jumped. Even though slaves were barely considered human back in those times, there were still laws that prohibited exceptionally cruel treatment. So the neighbor called the authorities, who had the LaLaurie's slaves impounded and sold at an auction. But Madam was sneaky. She arranged for her relatives to buy her workers and sell them back to her. After that incident, Madam's reputation began to change. People were no longer eager to attend the parties at their house, nor even interact with the family. Eventually, they were alienated by the Creole Society. And in 1834, things would only get worse. The Madam kept her cook chained to the kitchen by her ankle. For whatever reason, Madam had threatened to take her to the upstairs room. This terrified the cook. Whenever anyone went up to that room, they never came back. The cook decided she would rather die by her own hand than to suffer by Madame LaLaurie's, so she set the kitchen on fire. It spread throughout the entire house, and not a part of the mansion was left unscathed. Neighbors came rushing over to help fight the flames, but after the smoke had cleared, they made a horrific discovery in the attic. What I'm about to tell you is possibly one of the most graphic and horrendous scenes in American history. You have been warned. The fire had burned down the door to reveal the upstairs room filled with dozens of naked slaves. Some were strapped to what looked like an operating table. A few were chained to the wall. Others were crouched in small cages. One woman had her stomach slit open and her intestines wrapped around her waist like a cruel corset. Another woman's mouth was sewn shut, after first having been filled with animal feces. A man had a hole drilled into his head with a stick inserted, presumably used to stir his brains. Most of them had been dead for a long time, and some were unfortunately not. Madam and her husband were both doctors, and some theorized that they were practicing risky medical operations on their slaves. But the inhumane condition that they were in suggests that their reasons were less medical and purely sadistic. After the news of the LaLaurie's torture room spread across the city, a mob ransacked their mansion and destroyed every last bit of property they owned. They even tore up the backyard, where they discovered dozens of buried skeletons, including that of a small child, presumably the young slave who jumped off the roof. The mob chased the LaLauries out of town, and that was the last anyone had ever seen of them. Ever since that day, that house has had trouble getting tenants to stay. Residents claimed to hear constant sounds of wailing. Children said they were chased by a woman with a whip. Year after year, the house would be bought just to be resold again. Today, the mansion is owned by an oil tycoon who doesn't allow anyone inside. I wonder what he's hiding. Paris, the city of lights. But what happens after the lights go out? In today's chapter, I will be telling a true story from my friend Leia, whose grandpa lived in a flat in France. In 2001, 14-year-old Leia, her brother, his girlfriend, and their parents traveled to Paris, France to visit Leia's grandfather. He lived alone in a 3-bedroom flat, a block away from the Luxembourg Gardens. The apartment was covered in antiques, from old paintings to vintage furniture. Her grandfather loved collecting items with a history. Leia and her mother stayed in one of the bedrooms together. Their first night in that room, her mother fell asleep before her. Once her snoring had stopped, she began whimpering. It looked as if she was crying in her sleep. Leia wasn't sure what to do, but it looked like her mother was hurting, so she lightly tapped her on the shoulder. She woke up with a gasp, assured Leia that she was fine, and went back to sleep. On the second night, Leia was awoken by what felt like an earthquake. She tried to turn to her mom to ask her if she felt it too, but she couldn't move. She could see her mom right next to her in the corner of her eye, but no matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't move her head. She tried to scream, but nothing came out. After what felt like hours, Leia was awoken again by her mother nudging her shoulder. Leia's brother and his girlfriend, Jen, stayed in a different room. Jen was a very devout Catholic. She wore a cross around her neck and wrapped one of her purses with a large rosary. One night during the trip, she woke up and saw a blonde woman standing over her. Jen couldn't move. After minutes of struggling, she woke up, clutching the cross around her neck. The blonde woman was nowhere to be found. She sat up to catch her breath and looked over at her purse. The rosary had been removed. The next morning, everybody met in the living room while Leia's grandfather prepared breakfast in the kitchen. Jen was looking at some of the decor in the room and gasped. She pointed at a small painting hanging on the wall. That woman. I saw that woman in my dream last night. Leia and her mother walked over to the painting. Oh my God, I saw her too. The first night we were here, I woke up in the middle of the night and she was in our room. She was standing over you and said, "Can I touch her?" And I kept trying to tell her no, but I couldn't move. And then you woke me up. I think I saw her too, Leia said. I was brushing my hair in front of that old vanity in our room, and it started to feel like someone was standing behind me. The mirror is a little splotchy, but I could have sworn I saw a face slowly start to form in the mirror, but I ran out of there before I could find out. Leia's grandfather walked in carrying a tray with coffee. Grandpa, who's the woman in this painting? Oh, that's Marie. She owned this place before passing away a few years ago. The room that you and your mother are sleeping in was hers, actually. Why do you ask? They decided not to tell him about their experiences since he lived alone and they didn't want to scare him. Later that day, Leia and her family began to pack their things and prepare for their flight home. Her grandfather pulled her aside and said, "I want to show you something." She followed him into a room where he pulled out a beautiful jewelry box. Inside was a collection of intricate ivory hair pieces and combs. Do you want them? I feel like you'd really like them. They belong to Marie. Please, take them. His insistence weirded her out a little bit, and she politely declined. After that trip, Leia's mother came up with a theory that Marie really took a liking to Leia, and it was probably her who was subconsciously telling her grandpa to give her the jewelry box as a parting gift. So, the next time they visited the flat, her mother spoke to Marie. "Hi, we're here. Look, we enjoy visiting, but we won't come back if you keep doing things to scare us." And ever since then, no one in the family experienced anything strange in that house. Marie seems like a harmless spirit, but it is sort of odd how everyone in Leia's family had a terrifying episode of sleep paralysis while staying in that house. Do you think Marie was causing it? Or was this all just a big coincidence? If I were you, I'd lock my doors before listening to our final chapter. This is the story of Donna, a young girl who was left home alone one night for a little too long. There once was a 15-year-old named Donna. Her mother died when she was very young, and it was just her and her dad ever since, living in a peaceful suburb. They had grown incredibly close over the years. They would always know what the other was thinking, and even feel when the other was near. Some joked that they were psychically connected. One morning, Donna and her father were having breakfast. "I've got a meeting later today," he said. "I'll be home late, so don't wait up for me." He left some cash for her to order dinner, kissed her on the head, and headed out the door. Later that day, Donna came back home from school. Usually her dad would be home from work at this time, so it was weird coming home to such a still and quiet house. So she sat at the kitchen table and started to do some homework. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her neck. It went away as quickly as it came, so she decided to ignore it.
Hold on, what? What?
Where's your fat-headed Mimi?
At the store.
What?
At the store.
I can't hear you.
At the store.
At the store?
Mm-hmm.
Why is she always at the goddamn store?
I don't know, but I'm making a video right now, and you done called me, so you being in it
Hold
now.
on.
What?
Speak.
I am.
Why can't I hear you?
Hold on. Okay.
Ow! Her neck stung again. The pain was getting more more intense. She ran to the freezer to grab an ice pack and placed it on her neck. The pain began to fade away. I wonder what that was all about, she thought to herself. It was now 8 o'clock and still no word from her dad. She figured she could wait up a little longer for him and decided to order some pizza. Hi, I'd like to make an order. Yeah, sure, I can hold. The subject is still on the loose. The police are recommending everybody lock their doors and windows and not answer the door for anybody, especially at night. Hi, can I get a large pepperoni pizza? It was getting pretty late and she began to doze off on the couch and dream. She was a little girl again, in the house she used to live in when her mom was still alive. Donna was sitting at the kitchen table and she looked over at the stove where a woman with her back turned was making breakfast. Mom? The woman turned around. It was her mother. She walked over to the table and placed a plate of eggs in front of Donna. She whispered in her ear, "Don't open the door." What? Suddenly, she found herself standing on the side of a busy highway, cars flying past her. She could hear someone calling her name in the distance. Donna! 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 Across the highway, she began to make out a figure. It was her dad. Donna, don't open the door. Dad, I can't hear you. Where are you? Don't open the door. Donna sat up on the couch. What a weird dream. Felt so real. The doorbell rang again.
Don't open the
food's here.
door.
She stood up and started walking towards the door,
I
but
was
stopped
looking
when
the
she
whole
passed a window. It was a lot darker outside than she remembered. How long was I asleep for? She looked at her phone. It was 1 a.m. She called up the stairs. Dad? Are you home? The doorbell began to ring more persistently. Dad, is that you? She went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was her dad. Finally. She went to slide the lock open, but quickly locked the door again. Something wasn't right. She didn't have that feeling when she knew her dad was nearby. Then she remembered her father's voice from her dream. Don't open the door. She looked through the peephole again. Dad, are you okay? Did you forget your keys? Is someone there with you? Dad, why are you acting really weird? The doorbell kept ringing. I need you to answer me. I'm not opening this door until you answer me. The ringing went on and on and on. She didn't know what to do. Eventually, she collapsed on the floor in tears and ended up falling asleep next to the front door to the seemingly never-ending bell. Donna woke up the next morning on the doormat. The doorbell had stopped ringing. Dad, are you home? No reply. She looked inside the peephole. Her dad was still there, staring at her just as he had the night before. She carefully opened the door and froze. Her father's head stared back at her. On the ground was a note. I know you're all alone now. Thanks for watching. Do you have any ideas for future volumes? I'd love to hear.
I would've. Ow! I would've saw that. Be yelling down the street, "Hey! You gonna do that? Oh, I'm about to hang your head on a hook and get some meat tonight." Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Do something like that again, I'll cut your nutsack off. Bye-bye, guys.